Hey, 4 5s, welcome back to Art. Today, we look at a pretty exciting technique in art called perspective. What is this perspective, you may ask? Well, perspective is a technique where we can create the illusion of depth and space. So we can make a flat sheet of paper or canvas look like it goes on forever and has tons of space and depth. Well, how do we do that? Well, you may remember last week in your sketchbook prompt, I challenged you to make a building that looked 3D. Today, we are going to do that with 1 point perspective. But before we get into that, let's look at a couple of real world examples, photos of what 1 point perspective looks like. First up, we have this row of trees. What do we notice about this photo in regards to perspective? Do you notice any depth? Any space? I notice many lines all heading in the same direction. They might not be actual lines, but they're there. Here we have a busy city street. But what do we notice when we're thinking about perspective and that depth? As I look at it, I notice a lot of things about size. Everything seems to be getting smaller as it heads towards the middle of the picture. Next, we have these railroad tracks. And something I'm noticing is that all of the imagery and natural lines, artificial lines, they're all going to one spot, right in the middle of my photo. We call that the vanishing point. All right, I think we're getting a pretty good idea of what things we need in our perspective drawing. Here's what it might look like at the end of class today. Again, we have everything going to that vanishing point in the middle, which we'll make. Everything, it seems pretty big, but then it slowly gets smaller. Yeah, and there's lots of lines. So what do you think? Should we give it a shot? I think so. So here's what you'll need. First, a sheet of paper. Now, you could use one this size, or you could get really adventurous and get a huge sheet, which I recommend if you have a huge sheet, 11 by 17. Not only does it look pretty cool, it makes it actually a little bit easier to draw some of those details. Then, of course, we will need a pencil, one with an eraser, or if you have a nice eraser like this, that works. You will need a ruler to make some of our lines and a straight edge. Now you'll notice I have a large sheet of paper that's bigger than this one because I'm going to have to draw some straight lines and my ruler's not quite big enough. So once you have your supplies together, let's give her a try. All right, let's start with our blank sheet of paper and grab our pencil. What we're going to want to do is make an X through our paper. One thing you'll notice is if you try to do this with a ruler, it's a bit short. It doesn't quite reach the entire way. That is why we have a straight edge, and I will be using a large sheet of construction paper to help me go from corner to corner perfectly. Now, it's really important that we have a straight, perfectly straight line from corner to corner to help us in this drawing. So make sure you take your time tracing these lines. Next up, it's time to draw our vanishing point, which is going to be right where all of our lines meet. Let's make a small dot for our vanishing point. Then we need to create our horizon line, a horizontal line across our page. What we'll do is put our ruler going through the vanishing point and create a line straight across our drawing. Boom. All right. Looks like we got all of our lines ready to go. What's the next step? Well, we're going to draw some sidewalks that follow the bottom part of our X. And what we'll do is place our ruler on that vanishing point. And then we can move the bottom part of our ruler to a spot we like. However thick or wide we want our sidewalk, we will then trace our ruler to the vanishing point. We will then repeat this step on the other side and add lines to our sidewalk. Make sure to take your time, straight lines. Next up, we're going to draw some trees on one side of our page. It's up to you which side. Now, it's important when we draw these trees, they will be parallel to the side of the page. That means they will come straight up from the sidewalk. They won't lean one way or another. We want them to go straight up from the sidewalk. You will make your trunk first, just like this. Maybe add a couple spots for branches. This is a technique I like to use. One other thing to think about is we don't want our tree trunk or our branches to go above that X line. See that line right above my hand? We don't want our trunk, any of our trunks going above that. So once we have our trunk drawn, we will add our leaves, and we will use the Q-top method, which is kind of a fluffier, wiggly line across the top. Now this line may cross that X line, but we don't want our trunk or branches to. We will then create a few more trees, slowly getting smaller as we move down that line, all right? Making sure we're in between the sidewalk and the top line. Each tree slowly getting smaller. Take your time with these trees, and remember, you have an eraser, so use it if you make any mistakes. Looking good so far. And just so you know, you could create any type of trees you want. I'm making some more mapley trees, I like to call them. You could make whatever you want. And your last tree is pretty small. Once we finish our trees, then we can add a few details like grass, and I left a spot for a bench. Here, I'm going to use my ruler to draw lines that are headed towards the vanishing point. So you'll see I have my ruler on the vanishing point, and then I'm going to make a few lines for my bench so that it, as well as everything in my drawing, is heading towards that vanishing point. Then you may add a bench if you want, or move on to the next step. Speaking of next steps, I think we need to put some buildings over here. Now these are a bit tricky. We need to follow these X lines. So for our first building, we will make one line going straight across our paper, but we don't want to cross that X line, that top X. Our second line now is going to follow that X line, be parallel to it. And you can make this long or short, it's up to you, but it follows it, does not cross it. Then from the end of that line, we will go straight with a ruler all the way down to the sidewalk. Our last line goes in the notch right here we made earlier. And again, this is going to go straight down with a ruler. Boom. Taking our time, we've made a 3D looking building. Our last line we do is from the bottom of the building, we make a line straight across the paper. Look at that. All right. Now we're going to keep making buildings, and as you probably guessed, they will get smaller and smaller as we go down, making sure never to cross that top X line. We go 1 over, 2 across, 3 down, all the way to the sidewalk. Make sure you're using a ruler so we get straight lines. Then our last line, yep, that notch again that we made from line 1 and 2 makes our last line going down. And if we want, we can add that 4th line on the bottom. That way there'll be space between our buildings. If we leave that line out, our buildings are overlapping. All right, let's make a few more buildings that slowly get smaller. All right, we've taken our time and we've created buildings that go all along this sidewalk. But now we need some windows. Let's start on this front side. And this part's a little easy. These windows will just be squares or rectangles. I like to use my ruler to create some of these windows, but you can make them however you would like. There are no special rules for making windows on the sides of the buildings that are facing you. So let's make a couple of those. Now it's time to make windows on the sides of our buildings facing the street. And this is where it gets tricky. We have a few rules to follow. You see our horizon line? That's very important. Any windows above that must follow our top X line. Any windows below it follow the sidewalk or bottom X line. It's a little confusing. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to make a window on the top of this building. Now, the top of that window is going to be parallel to that line and the top of my building. And then I could just have the bottom of the window following the same way. Then I connect those lines, boom, and boom, and we've made that window. Okay, easy enough. Let's try one more time. The top of that window follows the top of the building and this X line. The bottom of the window also follows the top. You see, because it's right above that horizon line. And then straight lines to connect. All right, that makes sense. But if we go below the horizon line, now we must follow the sidewalk. So the top of this window will be, you guessed it, following the sidewalk line. Now, first I think I'll make a door, but the top of my door will follow the sidewalk line. Yep. Yeah. And if your line doesn't go the right way at first, that's okay. You got an eraser. I'll even add a window on this. It's important to take our time in this part, and if we mess up, it's all right. I messed up a few times my first time. So here we'll see a window. The top and bottom of the window, they follow the sidewalk. And why is that? Because they're under the horizon line. All right. So now we're going to go and add windows to the front of the rest of our buildings. All right. And your doors and windows don't have to look like mine. Be creative. Here, I've decided to add a little sign for a toy store. Something to think about when writing words is your last letter of your word will be biggest, just as they go to the horizon line. But be creative, adding windows and details to your buildings. A couple of last steps in our drawing. We want to erase our X line and our horizon lines, go back and fill in any spots we've erased. Then we're going to add any final details that you would like in your drawing. For me, I'm adding some roofs, which are just triangles. I'm going to add some road lines. I'll add some clouds in the sky. And any details you add, remember, the closer you get to the center, the smaller those details should be, whether it's people, cars, planes, anything. So take some time adding some details, finishing up your drawing. Looking good. All right, this is quite the drawing, I'm not going to lie. And it takes some time and patience, and I have faith that everybody can do it. And our final step, you'll see, is to trace in marker. Remember, using thick and thin markers depending on the details. But yeah, this is a lot of work, and it can be tough doing all of our diagonal lines and tracing and following. But if you take your time, you pause this video along the way, I know you can do it. And we're probably going to have 2 weeks to do this one. Next week, I'll show you how to color it in, but don't think you have to finish this in one sitting. Just do the best you can, take a break, come back, work on it later. 1 point perspective can be hard the first time you try, but I know that all of you school crafters can make some awesome art. So I can't wait to see it. And until then, see you later.